Hello everyone, welcome to the DeSmogCAST, where we clear the PR pollution that clouds climate science, shed some light on the biggest environmental stories that you need to know about. I am your host, Farron Cousins, and with me this week I have Brendan DeMelle, the Managing Editor and Executive Director of DeSmogBlog.com. Brendan, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Farron.
And you're located right there in Seattle, and over the last weekend you guys had a very, very massive, very important protest against Shell. Lay that out for us. What happened? You were a part of it. Tell us how it went.
I hopped in my kayak and joined hundreds of other kayaktavists, as they've been dubbed, as we engaged in what's been also called the paddle in Seattle, referencing the earlier, of course, WTO protests in Seattle, which made national and international news. And we're seeing the exact same thing happen here with the hundreds of kayakers surrounding this giant polar pioneer, the Shell Arctic drilling rig that's just arrived in town last week. I tracked its journey in, and it's been very controversial here. Of course, the Port of Seattle has contracted with Foss Maritime and Shell to have them store this Arctic drilling rig here, and the city of Seattle's in uproar over it. The mayor and the city council have vehemently asked Shell not to come and said that they're going to get fined, and there's ongoing legal battles already over this that are going to last for years to come. And this is all over the insanity of Shell's plans to go back to the Arctic this summer to drill for oil in some of the most extreme environments on the planet. And it's just it's unacceptable to the people here in Seattle, and as we saw, it became an international uproar, as we'll see growing over the coming weeks.
So as you mentioned, the international media covered it pretty well. What was the reaction, to the U.S. media? Was there any, real coverage to it, or did it just kind of pop and die?
For the immediate event itself, it created some great visuals. Of course, the hundreds of multicolored boats, and led by the indigenous First Nations and local tribes here, who are out in their canoes showing, solidarity against this, and we're of course dwarfed by the massive oil rig. So, visually, it was an interesting story short term. So yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see, and that was the idea. And that news did travel around the world. In the U.S. and on social media, of course, people point out the hypocrisy of us sitting there in plastic kayaks and using oil to get to and from. But again, that quickly was correctly debunked as this is a systemic problem, and just as northern whites in the days of fighting against slavery, didn't stop wearing clothing. They changed the system, and that's what we need to do here is to end our oil addiction systematically, and that's of course going to require everybody to fight in any way they can. So it became a big story, and there's more to come as Shell attempts to leave Seattle. There are plans from the activists to try to block them from getting the rigs out of the Port of Seattle, or at least delay, because there's such a brief window that Shell has in order to complete its drilling this summer, and if that can be stopped, that's the goal of a lot of the climate activists.
So what was the company's actual reaction to this? You had mentioned briefly, we were talking earlier about a shareholder meeting. What is the company doing in response to all of this opposition?
Yeah, perhaps the most high impact result of the actions here in Seattle is that in The Hague, when Shell had its annual general shareholder meeting, people were outraged about its Arctic drilling plans. Shareholders brought up many questions about it. They grilled the CEO over it, said it creates reputational risk, of course, for the company, and shareholders are deeply concerned about climate change, and they have passed a resolution overwhelmingly. 99% of shareholders voted to force Shell to plan for a world of 2 degrees Celsius warming, which is, of course, already too much, as we know, based on the science. But as it turns out, in recent days, we've learned that Shell internally is blowing past that reasonable target and planning for a 6-degree warmer world, which is just climate chaos, unbelievable devastation to food supplies, to water, to life on this planet as we know it. So Shell's, sort of both embracing and struggling with its own Arctic insanity.
Well, we've only got about a minute or two left here, but President Obama a couple of days ago told the Coast Guard graduates that climate change is a huge threat It's going to be a threat to the coastline. The Coast Guards out there need to be aware of this, need to, they're on the front lines essentially. So Obama has spoken out of both sides of his mouth on this issue. For him to go out there and say, look, hey, we got to protect our coasts from climate change, but in the other breath, approve this Arctic drilling. What side is he on, really? I mean, he's the one who gave the go-ahead for this.
That's right, and it's very sad to see. He's in a deeply conflicted and incongruous position now. As you said, he's told the Coast Guard and our national security establishment that climate change is a national security threat. We have to deal with it. We have to plan for it. And then in the next breath, he's saying it's going to open up more exploration opportunities, and he's granting Shell this insane drilling lease in the Arctic, which is, just again a symbol of the depth of our oil addiction and the problem that we face. And when you see the president, who's campaigned strongly on climate action, turning around and allowing Arctic drilling and talking about the opportunities that the Arctic, warming is going to bring, it just doesn't make any sense. And again, I think this is all going to come to a head as we head into the Paris talks and what the world's actually going to do, and whether or not the U.S. is going to be a leader or a leader in climate chaos.
Well, Brendan, thank you for being a part of this, for being out there, fighting the good fight. Everybody wants to keep up with this. The story is available. You go. The pictures are great, the video is great. DeSmogBlog.com. Make sure you also check out DeSmog.ca and DeSmog.UK, and we will see you all next time. Brendan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.